our ultimate 2025 Springbok team with André Pretorius.
Welcome back to the second installment of our series on our Springbok team that we're selecting, our dream team that we're building, André Pretorius and I. And we had a very good response to last week's video about the fullbacks, and André, we were discussing that a bit as well. But before I get to that, please remember to subscribe to this channel. We want to get to 20,000 subscribers by, say, end of June. If you can help us get there, we'll really appreciate it. So without any further ado, welcome back, André. What was your feeling about that previous video that we did?
Hi, MW. Hello to everyone there in, all over the world, actually. I enjoyed the video, and what I realized is that Damian Willems has got a lot more supporters than I thought he had, and especially for playing 15. And, you know, I was of the opinion that he's probably more suited in the midfield with his skill set, but he's got such a diverse set of skills that he can kick the ball from the back, he can be an aerial master. So, you know, the 15 jersey will suit him, like he has shown in the past in big games as well. So, yeah, that was nice to see the support that he got for the 15 jersey.
One of our main critics was actually our good friend Harry, who said, "No, we're underestimating Willems' speed. He's very fast. The backfield cover, we should give him more credit." But you want to revisit any of those scores that you gave him?
No, I wouldn't. And I don't agree with Harry at all because Willy's a tactical genius. And what that does is, like I said in the video, is the anticipation of what's coming from the other end of the field. Willy might be a bit older now and might not have Willems' speed, but the anticipation and the knowledge of the game and knowing where to go before it even happens, that gives him a couple of meters extra. And I don't think, you know, Willems is playing in the midfield more often than not. Covering at the backfield, running 8 to 9 Ks versus running 6 to 7 in a midfield is a different ball game. And, you know, it does take your legs away quite early in the game.
That's very interesting. The distances you just mentioned, is that actually true? Is that how far they run in the game?
It's context driven. You know, if it's a wet game, the kilometers would come down. But, you know, you'd look at anything between 7 and 9 for the fullbacks. And, you know, the 10s probably that's defending at the back. Just covering kick space and ensuring that they get into positions to take away the options of the kickers on the other side of the field. And then they need to get into position once there's a turnover to get back into position from backfield into front line to assist with the attack. So yeah, it's a lot of Ks. And if you're used to running short sprints, shuttles, reloading from side to side, you know, that's a lot different to covering long distances at the back. And then once you get the ball, you still need to be able to make good decisions under fatigue. And then when you want to attack, you need to have that ability under fatigue to be beating people. Now, Willems has done that. I just feel that, you know, if you're playing in the midfield more often than not, and you get to play at the back, a once-off is you can probably get away with it, but depending on the game. But you want a specialist at the back.
You mentioned fatigue now. That reminded me that I spoke to Kennedy Timber, the Vodacom Bulls skills coach. And one of the things he said was what they're trying to teach players is how to stick to what they were taught when they get fatigued. Because when you're fatigued, you tend to fall back into your old patterns and habits and stuff. And that's one of the biggest challenges of a skills coach. We're publishing that video. You would have been able to see it by now, Wednesday night. We did publish it then, so keep an eye out for that. So I'm excited about that. André, the next thing is we got a lot of input in terms of how we rate these players, and we decided to take some of that on board. So we're doing things slightly differently now. We're going to be adding a weighting to some of these criteria that we're using. Just tell us about, in broad terms, the 4 categories that we're going to be rating the players on, and we'll get into detail of what they actually mean when we start discussing them.
Yeah, I think with the wings in particular, we've narrowed it down to 4 categories. And you know, normally when you talk about wings, you think about try scoring, finishing, attacking, exciting. But I think because we're building a Bok team, we know what type of defense we're looking at, and how important defense has been for the Springboks in the past couple of seasons. Well, you know, for a while now, and they're developing the attack at the moment and trying to get more variety into their game. But the defense will probably be at the front for times to come. So the first weighted category we gave was the defense part, being a master of the Bok defense, and that's going to take about 40% of the total. And then we get to the attack and the finishing part, the way that they beat defenders, speed, evasion, a little bit of X factor in there, and a little extra, like an offload here and there. Do they have the ability to be able to throw one of those? Then we'll look at the kick chase and the aerial battle. How do they perform in that area? And then the last one will be work rate. So the attack will be 30%. The kick chase and aerial battle mastery would be 20, and then the work rate in the end would be 10. Now, giving it 10% doesn't mean that it's not important, but I think at this level, you're not going to be playing at this level if your work rate is not up to standard. So I think the work rate category is pretty much for the guys looking to get into the jersey. As we know, the current Boks, their work rate is superb, and it's more for the guys trying to get into that jersey, coming out of franchise rugby and needing to up their standard.
Right, now we understand how we're going to be rating them. Let's start with the candidates. And who's the first one up, André?
I think we'll start with Edwin van der Merwe. He's young in terms of tests played. I think he's only played one test. Very exciting. I think he's got so much potential. There are a couple of things that I think he needs to look at if he wants to make that consistent step up. So on the defense, when we've analyzed the Lions and a couple of the games, and if it's one game, you'd say it's coincidence, but a couple of the games where the teams were rewarded in the attack was on his side, with Henko van Wyk going up, he'd stay back, or he'd be up when he's supposed to be back, getting beaten around the corner. So I think on the defense, I scored him 25. On the attack, he's nearly a full mark for me. He's a 28. The way he's got the ability to finish with ball in hand and ball out of hand. I think he's probably one of the wings in the world with the best full pace run and chip kick, both feet. And the accuracy with which he does that, and the touch he does that with, is absolutely superb. So that's a 28 for me.
That's out of 30 now, no? But just put it into context so people understand. That 25
right.
was out of 40, and the 28 is out of 30. It just goes to show what the difference is.
That's right. On the kick chase and the aerial battles, I think he's willing to get up in the air. That's a 15 for me, and again, I think with the kick chase, it flows over into work rate, and he's a 7 out of 10. Feels like Edwin sometimes only plays when the ball comes to him, where with the Springbok wings, you want to see them working both sides of the ruck, both sides of the field. And I'm not saying that he doesn't do it. I think he can do it a bit more, because he's one of those players that you want to see with ball in hand, and not just on his side of the field. You want him popping up in the middle of the field like a lot of wings do at the moment, getting a couple of pick and goes. And I might be mistaken saying I haven't seen him do that, and maybe someone in the comments can remind me of some of these events occurring. But I think his work rate needs to pick up if he wants to be a consistent Boks starter.
I'm glad you raised him first, because I had an interview with Jan de Koning yesterday, the editor of Rugby 365. He wrote an article this past weekend about what's happening at the Lions. And one of the things he mentioned Edwin van der Merwe by name, was the body language of the players on the field. Clearly not happy, clearly not committing, clearly something has a miss there. How much of these relatively lower scores that you're referring to here do you think is attributable to the fact that something is not going that well in the Lions camp? There's something wrong there.
That would be purely speculation, and who knows the real reason he's leaving the Lions. We all know the Lions have always been a tight-knit group. The coaches get one thing right there, and they get them close together. But what you need to be careful of is, if you've got a good environment with a good culture, that you don't become good at losing, good at handling losses. and maybe, Edward felt he wanted to get into a team that he feels has got more opportunity, or the scope is a bit bigger. Body language wise, I can't say I've picked that up. The one thing I have picked up is it feels like he plays the game when the ball's coming to his side, and I'd like to see him with ball in hand more. It's so exciting to see with ball in hand.
You mentioned work rate. Yeah, I remember that one test that he did play, it was against Wales. There was one famous little clip where he tackled somebody. I think it was almost a dominant tackle, got the guy on the ground, jumped up and tackled the next guy who actually received the ball from the guy that he tackled. 2 tackles basically in one movement almost. That's the kind of work rate and defensive effort that he's putting in there that you're referring to, that you would want from a Springbok wing.
That's right. And I think with the work rate on the defense, the low number he got was because of some defensive errors that he made that was particularly visible in some of the games that we analyzed. But Edward is a physical player. He tackles, he gets body in front, he can put people back on their backs. He's very aggressive within that. The problem is within the Boks system, he's going to be required to be very disciplined. He's going to be required to get out of his comfort zone, get off the line, go and make reads, make a decision on if he's shutting down or switching back into the line. And I think that's the part that he's battling with. The physical part you wouldn't have a problem with, like you just said, you're making 2 tackles in probably the space of 3 seconds. The work rate I'm referring to is more, going to look for work. We talk about wings going to look for work, and all the international wings, it's kind of standard within their box at the moment.
There's a lot of talk lately about defensive patterns differing from a national team to a provincial team or a franchise team. For example, Ireland. Brian Driscoll, for example, said that he blames Jacques Nienaber's defense that he's implementing at Leinster for Ireland struggles in the Six Nations. There's a disconnect between how Ireland's defending and how Leinster's defending, because most of Leinster plays for Ireland. So this weekend they're doing their Jacques Nienaber defense, but next weekend they have to do a different defensive pattern. The question I'm asking this, when you talk about defense, we're looking at the box. So we're looking at a blitz defense, typical Jacques Nienaber defense, even though it's Jerry Flannery lately. The point is Edward not performing well in the Lions defensive structure, or is he not performing defensively well overall, or would he not fit into the Boks defensive structures? That's a very long-winded question, but I hope you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah, Envy, and I'm going to start the answer by just addressing the Brian O'Driscoll blame shifting onto Jacques Nienaber. With that statement, has he just said the Boks are much better than we give them credit for? Because all our players are coming from all over the world, playing in different systems all over the world, and yet when we get them into camp, when we get them into the Springbok system, they all buy into that one system. So maybe he's just told us the Springboks are a lot better than we thought they were, playing with players coming from different systems and getting them aligned. I mean, if you can't get players that's already centralized, that's already doing most of the things the way that the Irish are, and they still can't do it, I don't think it's a South African's fault that's getting, or that has a team leading a competition by quite a margin, having the best defensive record in that competition. It's ironic that you're blaming him for the Irish performances at the moment. But that's just my opinion. I had a good chuckle when I heard that. That was interesting to me.
Yeah, talking about the different patterns in terms of the Lions now, for example, that with Edward not really performing that well, and compared to the Boks, what you're saying there?
It will be difficult, and once you get comfortable with what's required of you, because you might be in trouble, but the wings have got license in the defense, and I'm talking from what I've seen. This might be different, and again, if someone knows something different, please put it in the comments and educate us on this. But what it looks like, NBA, it looks like the wings have got license. So we might be in trouble. Everybody's pushing from the inside, trying to just control the situation. If the wings make a read and they can shut the attack down behind the attack line, behind the front line of the attack, they're allowed to go. And Cheslin and Kurt-Lee, they come in off their wing so far to hit the 10 behind the first pod because they've made the read and they trust their read and they go and shut it down. The flip side of that coin is when you get it wrong, do you have the ability to identify the situation you're in, to go from shut to switch back into the line, push them into the 15s and get your defense set from there? And that's also a skill. It's part of why wings need to be quick in a Bok jersey, not just for the attack, but to be able to cover that space, try and cover the inside. If they throw the bridge ball, you can turn around, switch it around and get into that outside. So it's going to get he needs to get used to that. But I think a lot of wings want to do that. They just don't have the license. But once you do one type of system and you get told you need to go there where other coaches are telling you not, it takes a while.
So do you think once in a box setup, we just said, Rassie and the other coaches get all these players from all over the world to play in the Springbok mold? Do you think once Ed goes into the Springbok camp, you'll be able to adjust and get his defense back up to where it should be if he's selected?
I think there's one reason I think he would be able to. I think players are allowed to make mistakes once they do have to implement a system that they're not used to. So there's no use in telling Ed, will make your reads at the back, shut it down, and if he misses 2, he doesn't play in the next 10 games. You've got to give him, as much as you give him license to make decisions, you need to give him some freedom to make mistakes and then work from there. And obviously, these are world-class coaches. That's what they will do. Just to give him that reassurance, you're going to miss a couple, but geez, you're gonna make some hits at the back and you're going to take the pressure off us and you're going to probably convert some of those into turnovers for us. And once you get them confident like that, then you get some guys like Arendse and Kolbe just coming off the line, and it looks like they're doing their own thing, but they're not. It's very structured, very methodical, and it's taking risks, calculated risks. And obviously they do their homework before the game. They know what type of shape the teams run. They know when they turn the corner and go out the back. So all of that stuff starts making sense once you get into camp. You get the license to do that, and then you also get the freedom to make mistakes and learn from it.
That adds up to 75. Now that seems to be a pretty good score, but it's sort of neither here nor there. How does that rate for you as a Springbok winger score? Is it good enough?
Not yet. And I think it's quite, if you just go on these, it's quite specific, the stuff that he can work on and he can improve. He is a world-class winger, no doubt. If he's in a Springbok jersey, he's not going to let you down. The question is there someone better to implement what is needed to be done on the weekend? And that's why the Springboks are doing well at the moment. They've got expensive jerseys and guys keep knocking on that door, and Rassie has got them fighting for jerseys, which is what you want.
Expensive in more than one sense. I mean, FNB paid several million for that jersey, but clearly you're not referring to that. All right, so that 75 will be put into context when we look at the other wings, so we'll have a better idea of what it actually means. So who's next up?
Makazole Mapimpi, one of my favorite players, and probably because I know his history and the fact that he knows his way to the try line. He's a real fighter, and I can see in the last couple of games there's a bit of aggression there. It's probably when you do get on the other side of 30, you want to stop the clock a bit. But a handbag situations is also part of resting. So maybe that's part of it. But with Mapimpi, defense wise, a couple of tests where I was excited to see him back in the team, because where Cheslin and Kurt-Lee is very calculated with their shutting at the back, Mapimpi looks like he takes bigger risks, but he catches opponents way behind the advantage line when he does get it right. He's also physical, no problem with that. I just think that he misses more opportunities than Kolbe and Arendse when going out the back and making decisions. You know, you might be looking at different cues to go, but his score is a 30 out of 40, which is pretty decent. It's more for me the reads that he makes that's not as successful as, let's say, Kurt-Lee and Cheslin on the outside of our defensive line.
Sorry, he was caught out of position quite a few times last year, if I'm not mistaken. Is that what you're referring to?
That's correct. And when you get into, you need to be in a certain position to cover a certain amount of space. And when you get yourself, you know, behind the line or too far away, and you know, you actually create a new corner where you're supposed to be the corner, you do tend to be late on the shut, or you know, when you want to switch, you've gotten yourself too far into their line and you don't get to cover the outside. So I feel that there were instances, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the Argentinian test, where he had opportunities to shut. He didn't take us on a high line, and they beat us on the outside. So his consistency on the defense and closing up wide plays is not as good as Kolbe's and Kurt-Lee's.
Okay, right. Moving on.
On the attack, like I said, he knows where the try line is. He's a great finisher. I don't think he's as evasive as some of the wings we have, but he can bash himself over the line. He's got enough speed to finish situations where a lot of wings probably wouldn't. So on the attack, I gave him 25.
The one thing I noticed last year, remember it was against Australia, he tucked the ball under the wrong arm, and they the Australian defense knocked the ball out of his hand because he kept it on the approaching player's side. He was holding the ball in the wrong hand. Is that an issue?
I think it is an issue when they knock it out.
Well,
I think there's a lot of wings there's a lot of wings that carry it in the wrong arm. It's more a case of what makes you feel faster, where you carry it, how you hold it, especially when you've got space to cover and, you know, at full speed. It's more a case of where do you feel, you know, there's some wings run with it where they put the ball between their arms and push it onto their forearms so they can use their arms to run. Other wings tend to put it on the arm, so they can have the fend, but I think you'll be surprised with how many of wings carry it in the wrong arm running down, and then transfer once the threat comes, transfer into the next to get the fend. I think it's more a comfort thing. The other thing that Mapimpi's done, improved a hell of a lot, is his attacking kicks at full pace. He scored a couple of tries like that, or assisted a couple of tries, running on the wing, putting boot to ball, and, you know, finishing it off either himself or someone on the inside. And not just with the right foot, but with the left foot as well, because on the wing that he was playing, he needed that left foot on touch. So he's improved that quite a lot. And like I said, he knows where the try line is. He can score tries.
All right. Kick chase.
The one place that I think is probably is not a strength of his, if I can state it positively, is the aerial battles. The timing of his jump is sometimes late, which means that the other wings get into that space earlier. And then what Mapimpi then does really well is he doesn't go underneath the player. He does, however, dominate the next contact. So he's probably realized that his aerial players, you know, need some work, and focusing on the post event after the catch, once they've got it, gets on the ground and, you know, tries and dominates that contact. But I think getting into the air and being an aerial, you know, dominating aerial battles is not a strength of his. So his kick chase and aerial skills are at a 10 out of 20. And then he's a Springbok wing. He works hard. His work rate's at 10.
Okay, so that gives another 75. So he's equal to Ekel van der Merwe. That's quite interesting. About Mapimpi again, you mentioned the fact that he's got a bit of aggression in him. that aggression sometimes to me seems to be a bit out of control, unnecessary. And that exposes, your team and yourself to the risk of a card or a penalty and the likes. Is there a place for the kind of aggression that he's been showing lately? To me, it's a bit over the top.
Yeah, I was joking about it earlier, but sometimes fatigue makes you do silly things, or you might not be, it might be frustration. Your level of playing has gone down a bit, and there's no way to get rid of that other than having a good game, or you've done good preparation and your standard just isn't getting there. And sometimes it's just frustration, and sometimes it's fatigue. You want to have a bit of a rest more, and you just stay within that little tussle for a bit longer, which actually in turns tires you out even more. But I think it's frustration, India, and maybe he just needs a couple of good performances, really good performances to get himself out of that.
Yeah. He's in good shape though, huh? Physically, he's in excellent shape. I mean, that guy's, like I said earlier, I was jokingly saying that he's got 0% body fat. He's really looking after himself. I wonder how what his longevity is like. Will he make it to the next World Cup? What do you think?
Well, if you look at his durability, injury-wise, trying to think back at some big injuries that he's had, and I can't, there's nothing that pops out immediately, which means that his conditioning is very good. He looks after himself, ensures that he's in top shape to be able to be available for tests. So, at 34, he's played 46 test matches. I think it's going to be a tough one. If he's managed well, I think he'll be at the next one. If I look at all the documentaries and the way Rassie talks about him, I think he'd like to take him to the next one. I think.
Next up is Kane Moody, and we're talking about him at wing. And there's also a lot of talk about him maybe at 13. There's even people that mentioned why didn't we select him last week at 15, for example. For me, I don't know if you agree with him, but I don't see him as a 13. I know he started playing there. I know he wants to play there, but for me, he's a 14 or 11 for that matter. He can play both sides of the field. Remember about Corambetti, who was still standing around, and Moody just plucked the ball out of the air and scored a try. I'll never forget that in his debut match. Do you see him as a winger first, or is he more of a center? What's your thinking on him?
I think what I'd like to say is he's a wing that can play 13. If needed, you go 7-1, something happens, you need him at 13. He'd be able to play there for you, but I agree with you. I think the wing is probably his position.
Okay, let's have a look at his numbers.
So he's at a 32 out of 40 for me. Like I said, I think he's more of a wing, and also his consistency with the shot at the back needs a bit of work. He's not as comfortable as, and I keep referring to Kurt-Lee and to Cheslin in this regard because of their consistency. And, Kainan is very physical. We saw the tackle he made on Money Russ against the Lions, which was a game changer. The Lions were looking to turn the momentum there, and he absolutely diffused the situation there with that hit. So physicality, not a problem. I think it's more the consistency of the defense on that side, shutting, ensuring that you're closing wide plays. And like I said, I keep referring the players I compare that to is Cheslin and Kurt-Lee the whole time, because the consistency is good, the hit rate's very good, and I think that's where players like Mapimpi and the rest of the boys, it's just that consistency or the success rate with which they close wide plays, getting back into position. I think the more he plays, obviously, the better he'll get there.
I want to ask you something about his defensive efforts, though. The game against the Lions at Loftus, he was beaten more than once, one time by Inko van Wyk, for example, who just simply ran past him. I was wondering if he's in the best physical shape, form-wise, and he seems to have lost a yard or two in terms of pace. There's a lot of talk last year about his eating habits. Do you think he's maybe a bit out of shape?
I haven't seen enough of him to comment on that. It would be very strange to think that a player like Kane Moody, who's got a big career ahead of him, to have that be a problem. And if it is, it's an easy fix. It's an easy fix, and it's something that you can get rid of in, I think, quite quickly. So it's difficult for me to comment on that, and also being beaten on the outside, it's kind of like a line out. When the line out goes wrong, everybody looks at the hooker. And sometimes the lift is late, or the trigger was wrong, or the movement was wrong, etc. And the same thing with wings getting beaten on the outside. If you have a look at what's happening on the inside, he might be covering 2 or 3 guys because the fold was late, or the inside guy bit in and they left him with a 3-on-1. I'm not sure what the situation was. So it's difficult to see that. But again, I think Kainan is a clever rugby player. The more he plays there, and maybe he's got this ambition or aspiration to play 13. A lot of wings want to play 13. I don't know why. It's something that's popped up quite regularly, but maybe put your mind onto one position, become a specialist, and be a wing that can play 13.
All right. In terms of his attack,
On the attack is also an exciting player to watch. I think he's got those extra little touches. He always beats the first defender. He doesn't die with the ball. He'll get the offload away when it's available. He's quite secure with his attacking breakdown. So on the attack, it's a high score. Probably not as flashy and as exciting as Edwall in terms of his try scoring ability. But again, he's a good attacker. So he's a 27 out of 30 for me, where Edwall was at 28. And then aerial battle is the only player I gave a full mark at 22. If you're dishing up kicking plays purely for the fact that you've got one of the best aerial battle masters in your team, you need to know that this guy's the real deal. So he's a 20 out of 20 on the kick chase and aerial battlefront. And then work rate is a Springbok wing. I gave him a 10, and hopefully, it's not a case of that declining first and then the rest of this game being influenced by that.
You raised an interesting question there, André. The fact that Kainan has been struggling a little bit of his aerial game lately. He's made a couple of real, boo-boos, let's call it that. This comes down to the selection policy of any team for that matter, but supposedly the Springboks as well. You look at substance, what the player actually can do rather than his recent form more than anything else, because they obviously can regain his form as long as the fundamentals are good. What's your feeling about that side of it?
Such an important point you make there, because it's kind of going back to one good game doesn't make you a great player, but one bad game doesn't make you a bad player. That substance you're talking about, it's a reputation that you've built up. It's people know what your potential, and something you go through dips, and that doesn't necessarily mean you've become a bad player. You're just lacking a bit of fundamentals, or a bit of confidence, whatever the case may be. But that doesn't make you a bad player. And I think, I think about there's a particular situation against the Sharks where he went up, and instead of having his hands, call it the bucket, he had his hands turned around against Ethan Hooker, and he lost that aerial battle against him. That's one I vividly remember. That's, that could be pressure, because they were under the pump there. They were taking a bit of strain. Everything was going the Sharks' way. And, he might have thought he was going to go up and then turn his hands, or whatever the case may be, but he didn't. But that doesn't mean that Kainan Moodie is bad under the high ball. He's still got the potential for me to be a 20 out of 20. He's going through a bit of a dip. Maybe the conditioning, like you mentioned, might be a factor, and he sorts that out, and the rest of the stuff, smooths out. So no, definitely substance over form. He's a 20 out of 20 for me in the air.
Well, that is 89. That's quite a big jump from the 75 that Edwall and Mapimpi scored. Now, that's a big jump. That is major. That's a major score.
And again, MV, I think it's, and this is what we love about these videos is people getting involved in the comments. You know, boost your player, back your player, tell us why he should be in there, because that's what this is all about. And again, this is about building the ultimate Bok wing. What you can't just be a good attacker like Edwill and lack on the work rate and inconsistent defense part. You know, you need to tick every single box to be able to keep your jersey, because you become a Springbok. To keep that jersey, you need to be able to do all of those things consistently. And if you don't, we mentioned it earlier, there's another guy knocking to take that jersey, and he probably will if you're not picking up your standard. So he's a good defender. He's more consistent, shutting attack at the back. Not as consistent as Cheslin and Kurt-Lee, but definitely more than Mapimpi and Edwill. And on the attack, he's an exciting player. In the air, he's great, and obviously his work rate is at a 10 as well. So, just to give context on why he's got such a good mark in comparison to the other two.
All right. Our friend Harry refers to the Springbok wings, and any wing for that matter, that wears a scrum cap and is fleet-footed, as a Lekkerback. and Edwill is the only other Lekkerback here. Let's get to the real Lekkerbacks now, the gold standard, the ones you keep referring to as the ones that everybody should aspire to, to matching. And that's, of course, Kurt-Lee Arendse and Cheslin Kolbe. First up, Kurt-Lee Arendse, who's now, gone overseas to play in Japan for a bit on a sort of a sabbatical from the Bulls. I'm not sure if that was the best decision they've ever made, but let's get back to that a bit later. Tell me what you thought of Kurt-Lee's ratings.
Well, I couldn't give them 20 for the aerial battle because I said Kainan is the best for me, so I can't give them 20 there. Their marks are pretty similar. I've gone for the one a bit more on the other, but only on the defense side. But we'll run through Kurt-Lee. Defensively, very sound, knows exactly what's required from him. His success rate on the shots is very good. He's got the speed to cover and switch when it goes back. So he's at a 35 for me, and I think he's played about 23 tests, I think. And the test that he has played, he's been good in a Springbok jersey. So defensively, and like we said, we're trying to build a Springbok wing, and defense is quite important for him. So he's at a 35 out of 40 there. On the attack, I've given him full marks because when he gets an opportunity, small space, he doesn't get bullied into touch. He doesn't lose ball in the attacking breakdowns. There's not a lot that he does wrong. I think if you go international wing wise, he's got speed, probably not Biel Barry speed, but he's got enough speed to be a threat when he gets the ball in open space. So he's at a 30 out of 30 for me. Kainan's hit the 20 out of 20 for the aerial masters, but Cheslin and Kurt-Lee is at an 18. I've given them 18 out of 20. And then work rate, Springbok wing, he needs to be at a 10, which he is.
93. Okay. Right, a couple of questions about Kurt-Lee. First and foremost, you coaching in Japan, you know what it's like playing in Japan, coaching in Japan, living in Japan. Do you think that might have had any sort of effect on his game plan? I'm not saying either positive or negative. Any effect? Is he going to be well rested? Is he going to be a bit rusty? What effect could the fact that he's been playing in Japan for 6 months by the time that we get around to the tests? What effect would that have had on his form?
MV, well, I pulled these stats in comparison to Cheslin within the Japanese league. Now, the big thing here is that teams are playing with a lot of foreigners tend to be more successful, and you think, well, that's quite obvious. But what happens is that you need to be able to defend those foreigners with your Japanese teammates. So which makes it difficult at times. And being the players that Kurt-Lee and Cheslin are, they tend to be all over the field. Their work rate's really high, and I don't think they'll be rusty. I think the type of game that they play over here, which is fast-paced, quick ruck ball. There is a kicking element to it. A lot of teams are kicking high balls. Everything that he needs to do, he's getting, let's call it practice at that in this league. Both of them. Suntory is not doing that well, which means Cheslin is working harder, he's grinding. I know people saying that his form's a bit down. It's difficult when the team's form's down, but they had a good win against the Blue Revs on the weekend, which is Kwagga Smith's team. They're doing quite well, actually. So I don't think so. I think if anything, their rugby is not as physical, which would mean that their bodies have taken would have recovered quite well, but they've still got enough contact and enough of that type of rugby to be effective when the time comes to put the Springbok jersey on. So no, I think Kurt-Lee's going to be superb in the Springbok jersey.
Right, let's talk about the Superman, the guy who could sidestep you in a phone booth, Cheslin Kolbe. You just mentioned the fact that people think he's a bit out of form, but like you said, it's about the team around him, how well they're performing. So, I mean, to me, he's the crown prince of wings. I heard the other day he was actually eligible for France, and luckily Rassie, snatched him away from there when he was still playing in France. One of the best wings we've ever had in South Africa. Small wings as well. That's another thing, interesting enough. Our wings are typically quite small compared to other teams' wings. Duan van der Merwe is a huge guy, even though he's also South African. Rassie goes for the smaller guys. It's just a matter of interest. Why is that?
It comes down to your game model and the defense model that's been put on the table. Who can implement that? Now, if we had, let's say you take Rab Makswane. If Rabs had the ability to be able to defend at the wing, shutting down plays, to attack and beat people the way he does, I know his attack is phenomenal. He'd be playing in the Springbok jersey because he's ticking the right boxes for what they require of the wings. I think there's a lot of good wings in South Africa that's good in certain parts of it, but not all of it. And, if you look at Cheslin, and both of these players are very physical, punching way above their weight. They don't, they've, was it Kurt-Lee or Cheslin who put Barrett on his backside in one of the tests, running straight at him, put him on his backside. A little wing running onto a lock and putting him flat on his back. So they're punching way above their weight. Their work rate's way up there. You name it, they're doing it, and that's why they're playing there. It doesn't matter their size. And then obviously the ability to create something out of nothing. They've also both got that. I think Cheslin probably a bit more just because of his feet, and people think they've got him, defenders think they've got him, and then he's away from them. Where Kurt-Lee is more of a speed, swerve. He can step. Believe you me, he can step. But I think Cheslin just, takes him on that one for me.
Right, let's hear the scores from Cheslin. Defense, like you just said, that guy's got a heart of a lion. That's the first time we actually saw a small wing defending like this, because there were a lot of questions asked about Cheslin actually being selected for the Springboks, and a lot of mouths were, shut up after we saw what he can do. He showed what a small wing can do. Talk to us about his defensive rating.
It's just 2 points better than Kurt-Lee's, and I think Kurt-Lee would be disappointed because after pulling the stats, Kurt-Lee actually made 4 jackal turnovers in the league so far, where Cheslin has got none so far in the Japanese league. So I think Kurt-Lee would probably argue this one, but just purely for the fact, his physicality, the way that he gets body in front, I can remember a lot more bigger, dominant tackles from him than I can from Kurt-Lee. And I had to go and look for something to differentiate the two, and put Cheslin at the top. He's got more experience, and obviously he's just a world-class wing. They both are, but Cheslin pips him on the defense with a 37 out of 40, and the rest of the marks very well, exactly similar. 34 attack, 18 for aerial, just because again Kanan's taken the 20 and the work rate's at a 10.
That's a 95. Yeah, no, remember the question I asked you right in the beginning, how does 75 rank? How does it stack up against the others? Quite clearly not very well. So 75 compared to 93, 95, that's class. I mean, that goes to show. So that's our top five. But once again, like last week, you've got a bit of a bolter for us here, a dark horse that we know nothing about, that we're not expecting you. So I was waiting for this because you didn't want to tell me beforehand. So I'm as excited as everybody else. Tell me, who is it?
Yeah, look, I didn't rate him. It's someone that I've been watching. He hasn't played a lot. I think he's played 2 URC games, and there's something there. And because I had him as the dark horse for this week, I went and spoke to a couple of people just to find out what they think, and they all feel that there's something there. He can be a Bok, just work rate wise, mental toughness wise. He needs to up it a bit, and it's Stravino Jacobs from the Bulls.
Okay, yeah, I'm flabbergasted. I'm a Bull supporter. I am blown away. Tell me why. I'm very, very interested to hear this.
He's a physical wing. I'm not sure about his pace. I haven't seen enough of him, but just the fact that he can bust through tackles is exciting to watch, and he finishes really well. It's just the impression that I got was that work rate is still a bit of an issue, and the mental toughness side, and again, mental toughness is such a vague thing to talk about. Sometimes it just comes down to knowledge and educating a player and making them realize what their true ability is to get that out of them, and not always make a player feel like you're fighting for a jersey. And if you make a mistake now, you're gone. Give him a bit of freedom. But I think there's something there, MV, probably not this year, maybe also not next year. You don't know, but I think he's going to be a Springbok.
I watched him. He hasn't had that many chances. I know he was injured a little bit, and that's the first thing. I thought he was a bit rusty. He made a couple of funny decisions, which I think was directly could be directly related to the fact that he wasn't playing that much. He hasn't had enough time to play. And I think that adds into the mental thing that you're talking about. Lack of confidence because of a lack of playing time. And I think as he goes along, he's going to get better the more time he gets, because he's probably going to be playing for a while now because of all the Bulls injuries. I think it's a good point. Another one of those Cape School products, Paul Gymnasium, he's been with the Bulls since I think 2020, but you very rarely see him. I hear what you're saying. Speed-wise, I also have a couple of question marks, I must be honest. I'm not sure about how fast he actually is, but I hear where you're going. That's quite a bold issue. You didn't rate him, but you still think he might be somebody that
I didn't rate him.
consider.
I think it would be unfair to rate him. He'd score well below what is probably necessary. I think it's purely a dark horse for the potential that's there, and he sorts out a couple of those issues. I think one of the things would be an aerial skill thing that he needs to improve. That he'd probably get targeted. He's not the tallest wing that there is, but Cheslin and Kurt-Lee have shown that it doesn't matter how tall you are. If you get up in the air, you're explosive. You can still win those aerial battles. So yeah, it's a one far out of left field. But the games I've seen him play, he's been very physical, beats defenders, gets the offload away. Maybe someone gets him into a bit of a position and gets him that Springbok jersey one day.
Right, let me just summarize this. Edwin van der Merwe, 75. Kaden Moody, 89. Makazole Mapimpi, 75 as well. Kurt-Lee Arendse, 93. Cheslin Kolbe, 95. And our dark horse for this week, Stravino Jacobs. Let us know what you think about that. Andre, thanks, man. That was interesting. I like this kind of discussion. I like the weighting that we're giving to this different skills as well. I think it looks well. What's your thinking?
Yeah, definitely something that'll pique the interest and get the conversation going. There's one guy I'd like to mention, which I think can still play wing. He's playing 13 at the moment, but Jesse Kriel is also a great option at wing, and purely from a defensive point, the way that he closes space from 13 on the outside. If we're ever in trouble and we need a wing to implement our defense system, be a threat on attack, be physical, I think Jesse can do that as well.
Talking of those, of Jesse, next week we'll be doing the centers. All across the world, Damien Dalenda, Jesse Kriel, a couple of exciting youngsters over here, Jurenza Julius. lots of things to talk about. So can't wait for that one. Thanks, Andre.
Our ultimate 2025 Springbok team with André Pretorius.